Contrast is one of the most effective ways to add visual interest to your page. A striking interest that would make readers want to look at your design. And to create a visual hierarchy amongst the different elements means creating good contrast. The important rule to remember is that for contrast to be effective, it should be strong. Don't be a wimp about making and applying contrast to your work. Contrast can be created in many ways. You can create contrast with large type and small type. You can use old-style fonts with bold sans serif fonts. You can use thin lines and thick lines. You can even add contrast of warm and cool colors, smooth and rough textures. In this example, if these two newsletters came across your desk, which one would you pick up first? They both have the same basic layout. They both have a nice, neat look. They've got the same information. Really, the only difference between the newsletter on the right is that it has contrast and therefore your eye is drawn to it. The same is true for both of these resumes. Contrast is crucial to the organization of their information. A reader should always be able to, at a glance, understand what the document is about. The one on the left is a fairly typical resume. The information is all there, but nothing grabs your attention. Notice some other problems. There's two alignments on the page. There's centered and flush left. The amount of space between separate segments is also very similar, and the job title blends in with the body of the text. On the right, you can see where we've corrected the problems. The headlines are much stronger and you instantly know what the document is and what the key points are. We've also contrasted the spacing and the indentation of the information, and everything is now aligned to the left, but there's two different contrasts in the indents that makes it much easier to read the headlines and the body copy. In this layout, we've got a tall, narrow, vertical columns in the newsletter. So to contrast it, we put some strong headlines that are creating a horizontal contrast in direction across the page. In this example, it's a typical phone book advertisement. One of the problems is that everything is basically the same size, the same weight, and visually has the same importance. So where do we begin to improve this advertisement? To create good contrast, something needs to be de-emphasized. This means we need to decide on what to focus on that can be the biggest and the boldest. Not everything needs to be in all caps. And we need to decide which items can be grouped together in proper relationships. Now here's the redesign. Notice that we've even removed some conflicting elements. That border wasn't a focal point, so we made it smaller and we got rid of all the stars that were pulling our attention away from the ad. Don't be afraid to make items small to create contrast with larger items. And also, create some blank space. Having one major focal point will draw your reader's attention. Notice that everything also has good proximity and a good central alignment. And we even repeated the bolding of the name and the phone number. This is a much stronger ad because the elements are now in play. In my opinion, contrast is the most fun of the design principles, and it can be the most dramatic. A few simple changes can make a difference between an ordinary ad and a powerful one. Which of these two ads would you most likely take a second look at? The power of contrast gives you more bang for your buck. With just a few simple changes, the differences can be amazing. Notice how we've contrasted elements on the left and the right design. The headline is much bolder and takes up most of the space at the top. The subheads are still bold, but we've increased their size to give it more contrast with the body copy. The tagline, "Be a Cowboy," is repeated in bold at the bottom, and you can even read the phone number and website much easier. Most importantly, we've taken that bold graphic, the cowboy with the lasso, and we've dropped his opacity and put him in the background larger. This makes the text stand out and come forward. Contrast, of course, is rarely the only concept that needs to be emphasized, but you'll often find that if you add contrast, the other concepts seem to fall into place. Although the ad on the right looks like a radical leap from the one on the left, it's actually just a methodical application of the 4 basic principles. You can see the one on the right has better alignment, it has good proximity of information, a repetition of items, and finally, there's good contrast to tie everything together and capture your attention. Contrast on a page is what your eyes like to see. So if you're putting 2 elements on a page, elements that are not the same, such as a typeface or 2 lines, they cannot be similar. They must have good contrast. Contrast helps add interest and organization to your information.